Horacio Najera in Spanish. I am a journalist in exile in Canada since 2008. And what else can I say? I fled from a city called Ciudad Juarez, which is right at the US-Mexico border. And at the time when I was there, that city in particular became the epicenter of the war on drugs in Mexico. And of course, one of the consequences of that war was the attacks against journalists, and that involved me as one of the targeted journalists, and that led me to, or forced me to look for asylum in Canada. Since well, in particular, in Ciudad Juarez, the war began in 2005, sort of, yeah, ish. We started to see things getting worse and worse and worse. 2006 is when the President Calderón officially launches this military intervention against organized crime groups, and also when organized crime groups started to fight between them. So I guess since those years, we started to see how the conditions for journalism begin to deteriorate from both sides, because this is not only something that, it was something again, criminals created. No. We started to see threats coming from both the government and also from organized crime groups. In my case, I was the senior correspondent for Grupo Reforma, which is one of the most important and influential newspaper groups in Mexico. And I was kind of digging deep in terms of organized crime and illicit activities, both sides of the border. So that when in 2008, when was kind of open season for crime, myself and other members of the journalism community there, we started to being threatened, harassed, and in my case, I guess the tipping point for me was when my wife was also harassed and threatened. That's when I said, you know what, I don't think we are safe here, because before that, and probably you have heard this from other activists or journalists, we try to stay as much as possible. We try to, I can hold it. I can stay a little bit more. But in my case, when I see how those threats spread into my family, that's when I said, no, well, I can even defend myself in reality, because if somebody wants to shoot you, well, they're going to shoot you, right? But you feel like, okay, I can handle this. But when this situation affects directly your family is when you have to make a choice. And in my case, my choice was to leave. Well, to be honest with you, we came to Canada like blindsided. The only thing that we knew about Canada, it was cold, and Canada has polar bears. That's the only thing that we knew about Canada at that time. For us, was a kind of a shocking surprise when we landed in Vancouver, and when we get into the general section of the airport, and we heard, I don't know, 15 different languages, and we saw people from all over the world, and we said, okay, are we in Canada? Where are we? Because we were waiting to find, RCMP officers with, these fancy uniforms and, the things that the way that you perceive Canada. And we were hoping to see, super cold and, the whole Canadian landscape as seen outside of the country. So we came here and we have no idea about anything about the country. We came here because in those days, because of NAFTA, Mexicans didn't require a visa. So that was kind of the easy way to leave the country. And we basically, the first goal for us was to survive. Okay, we're here. Okay, then, okay, what do we need to do? Okay, then we started to research about, okay, there's a process and you need to apply, you need to fulfill some requirements, and you will be presented into a tribunal, immigration tribunal, where you can expose your case and wait for the decision. So that's what we did. On the social side, that was it was a big shocking experience, because we lived at the US-Mexico border. So we thought we speak English, or kind of English, right? But here we realized that we speak Spanglish rather than English. So because when you live at the border, you speak Spanglish. If you know, you throw a little bit of English, throw a little bit of Spanish, and you can manage to get what you need. And then we came here, and it was like, boom, wow. So it was like, okay, let's go back. So we went back to school, and we have to start from zero, and to learn how to speak, how to write, how to read. So it was a complex moment. And finally, the other thing was we learned how to live without family, without a network, because in Mexico we had a network of support around us. My father-in-law, my mother-in-law, my parents, family, that if something happened, you just call them and they come. Just to give you a quick example, when we bought the house, the last house that we had in Juarez, the house requires some flooring to be fixed. And since my father-in-law, who already passed, he was a mason his whole year, so just called him and, hey, we have this issue, blah, blah, can you come? Yeah, okay, sure. So we traveled to his city, picked him up, brought it to our new place, and he fixed everything for us. So that easy. And here it was like, what do we do now? I mean, if you're sick, how can we keep each other? For instance, my wife and I worked for a couple of years as janitors in different locations. So we have to clean different offices every day, and in a big community center. Plus, in the mornings, my wife worked as a housekeeper, and I was in charge of the kids. So, for instance, in the morning, I mean, we worked for around 4, 5 p.m. to 3, 4 a.m. So went back home, sleep. My wife wake up at 7:30. She went to work. Then I have to wake up and, prepare the kids for school, cook breakfast and so, and then cook, clean the house, all the chores, and then cook for the whole family. Then we have to leave, but then our older son in those years was 17. So, okay, you are in charge of your siblings now. Okay, we're leaving, and so it was complex. Of course, we have people around us from the community, but it's not the same like having your own family. So those years were complex for sure. Well, still are. They still are, because in 2017, when my wife was diagnosed with cancer, I became her caregiver. So I have to leave everything that I was doing and do whatever I need to do for her and for the whole family. So yeah, it's complex. Oh, sorry. Yeah, well, the book was amazing. It was an amazing gesture of kindness from Peter Edwards, one of the best journalists specialized in organized crime in Canada. We met when I worked for 6 months in the Toronto Star, and met there. And of course, we have some common interests as journalists, and we talk. And fortunately for me, in those days when I was working there, Peter began to get some information about a group, thing in the way that this group was organized and acting across Canada. And he started to hear that, and he get some information about this group. Was closely working with a Mexican organized crime group, and they were bringing drugs into Canada. Then he got word from another operation by the police in Ontario that led to the arrest of other completely separate group also working with Mexicans. So he was very, I guess, honest with himself and says, you know what, I know nothing about cartels or Mexican organized crime. Oh, Luis is here. Okay. So he called me and he said, would you be interested in working this? And I said, sure, of course. And so that's when we started to work in the book, The Wolfpack. And I think this book is important because I can say, at least here in Canada, and I haven't read another book or heard about another book overseas that shows the new generation of organized crime, the new generation of criminals, which is completely different than, the old, Godfather guys, like the old mafia guys and the traditional organization of the mafia. This is completely different, and this is showing an evolution and the change, a generational change in the underworld, and this change happened here in Canada. So that was a good example. So yeah, it was a great experience for me, and of course my gratitude, Peter, because he was kind enough to, because as he said to me, probably I can get information and write, but I there was like a big chunk of information and understanding that I don't had. So you had it. So let's do it together. So, and yeah, the book is called The Wolfpack, and it's already in French. Was also translated into French now. And it's, I don't know, it's a great experience, but also for me in a different way was also a great experience, because that allowed me to meet people from Random House Canada, and I am currently working in my memoirs through, so that's a separate project, and it was good because if I didn't work with Peter before, I don't think I will have the opportunity to talk to them and to, this is who I am, and probably I wouldn't be able to be working in this project as I'm working now. It's a kind of way of me paying back to Canada by showing, hey, you have this problem, and I think this is important, and you should be putting more attention to it. And yeah, but also, I mean, the overall value of the book for me is that I was able to recover some personal dignity, if you think about it, because it was like, yes, I'm a journalist again. I feel I was happy, I was engaged, I was motivated, because I was doing something good, and I guess journalism is about being the intermediate between, or the middle person between power and society. And in this case, that was my way. I recovered that opportunity to reach to power, criminal power, and to bring it into society and say, hey, this is something that you need to be aware of. Yeah, no, that I mean, that's for me the value of the book, basically. It's beyond whatever, awards or money or whatever. It was this opportunity to feel and to recover my personal dignity. I got this idea of creating a podcast in Spanish, super rudimentary in the production side, because I didn't have the tools and the money to, create something like more professional. But yeah, I created this podcast, and I had this podcast I produced 13 episodes, but I stopped because one, the platform that I was using to produce the podcast, they changed the way to monetize. Interestingly though, around 60% of my audience was in the United States. That for me was kind of interesting, because the podcast began as a series of reflection about themes somehow related with my life. For instance, the first episode was about exile, but from the sense of, I think I launched the podcast the World Refugee Day. It's all today, the World Refugee Day, and facts and blah, blah, blah. And then at the end, I said, well, I know this experience because, and then I went through that with my own experience. Then another episode was about grief and loss because of the pandemic. So I talk about it. And I also spoke about, okay, in my case, I have lost 12 colleagues and many, many friends who were killed in Mexico because of blah, blah. And then, so I was kind of the first stage of the podcast. Then I realized that it will be good for me to expand. And then what I did was I started to produce episodes about Latin American issues. For instance, I spoke about in those days, the protest in Colombia, the situation in Colombia. And then I also spoke about the left and the right, Trump and Bolsonaro in Brazil. I also spoke about Mexico, about populism. I spoke about, in those days when a notorious case of a general who was arrested in the States. He was the former Secretary of Defense from Mexico, charged in the States of organized crime charges. But then suddenly he was deported to Mexico. And in Mexico, he was, of course, acquitted. So, okay, what's the role of the military in Mexico? Blah, 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 blah. So I went through those kind of things. So, and that's another reason because I decided to end it, because I realized that I tried to be better in the next episode. So I started to put a lot of time in researching, writing, teaching, and those kind of things. So it took a lot of time. It was taking a chunk of time, and I need that time to look for jobs. And then you have you are unable to monetize that. So I said, no, I think, unfortunately, right, I have to shut it down. And yeah, that's what happened. Well, one of the things that I think it's fair to tell is when you are, well, let me put it in this way. There's two kinds of immigrants in Canada. Those who immigrate because of looking for a better future in terms of prosperity, like those who come here and they look for jobs or they have already a job secured. And there's the refugees, right? Those who need to leave the country because if you stay, you will die. Now, among the refugees, I will say there's two kinds of categories of refugees. You have those who fled the country because of the general conditions of the country. For instance, Ukraine, Afghanistan, like people who cannot live there anymore because they will be slaughtered because of ethnic whatever. But you have the other category of refugees who are those who are actively engaged in changing or improving the situations or fighting for an improvement of the situations in the country, which are journalists, activists, lawyers, politicians, teachers. So those people who are actively trying to do something. And why am I doing this differentiation? Is because if you are a peasant in a country afflicted by war, you come to Canada and you struggle, yes, but eventually you take whatever comes to you is great, right? You say, yeah, I'll take it because I'm happy. But in our case, those who had a good life, that we were doing something for democracy, security, whatever. And one day you leave everything behind and you come to Canada, and then you face a system that says, no, your place is here. And you cannot move from this. I don't know, I think I spoke a little bit about that before, but Canada is kind of a Lego country, like a country made by Legos. So in my case, if you are an immigrant, okay, and if you are an immigrant for certain part of the world, your Lego is this. And it's really hard to jump into a different level. So for us, for me, again, I had a great life there. And I was working for me, the best newspaper in Mexico. And my wife worked for a large multinational company as a human resources specialist. So we have a good life. We have a house, we had 2 cars. We lived 15 minutes away from the border. So if we need something, we just cross the bridge, get wherever we need, came back home, and that's it. And then we left everything behind. We came here, and the system says, no, you are not able to do your work again, or in a way that you were used to do it. And in my case, what I did was, okay, well, how can I use my skills, my knowledge? Okay, I go back to, so I went back to school. I got a master's of law affairs at University of Toronto. And I thought, well, maybe this could be a good way to reinvent myself. But it didn't. Then, okay, tried to do a little bit of journalism here and there. But again, journalism is in a very complex situation everywhere, especially financially. So then I said, well, maybe I can do another reinvention. So I went to another master's degree in emergency management. I tried I look for programs in security, global security, and those kind of things, but no. I wasn't able to find a good one. And then, well, a good one here because it's funny. After the Global Affairs Masters, I applied to King's College in London to the terrorism program. And I got 2 offers from 2 different programs at the same time from King's College. I got an offer from the program, but I also got an offer from the global security program at the same time. 2 years in a row. They sent me the offer 2 years in a row. But as you well know, living in London is insanely expensive, especially if I have to go there for a year and leave my family here. It doubles the cost. So I wasn't able to do that. So, well, I went to York. I did my master's degree in 1 year instead of 2 years because between my wife's conditions and my need to, I was in a hurry to finish. So I did the master's degree in 1 year. And also at the same time, I completed 2 different diplomas, one in global security studies and one in Latin American studies. And, but again, nothing happened. And long story short, I am currently working as weekend janitor in a supermarket in downtown Toronto. And going back to this Lego example, one night I just saw the ad and said, just out of curiosity, just gonna send it. And I sent my resume. And the only thing that my resume had was my experience as a janitor in Vancouver. And my education was my undergrad studies in Mexico like 30 years ago. I sent it. Sunday night. Monday morning, my phone rang. Oh, will you be able to come for an interview? Just like that. So I said, this is how the system works, right? It doesn't matter. They didn't care about, I mean, you only have this experience in your resume, blah, blah, blah. They don't care. They need people. And they probably read my name, Spanish name, janitor. That's good. Bring it in. And here I am. In Canada signed the UN agreement for the protection of refugees in 1969, my recollection. So, or in the 60s. The world has changed a lot from the 60s now. Because of technology, particularly the internet especially, now the global south is more aware of many, many things, more educated, and it's more engaged. That creates a different wave of refugees. Again, you have the refugees affected directly by something, but also have a new or a larger or a different way of refugees who are activists, journalists, writers, thinkers. And I think this new world requires to Canada to move from being a refugee friendly country into a refugee embracing country, which means you are here, we are happy to have you here. How can we help you to succeed? Because if you succeed, Canada succeeds. Just imagine how, for instance, people, forget about me, people with the marvelous skills of, for instance, teachers, lawyers, activists, if they had access to the possibility to probably to educate, because we all need education, of course, we need to continuously engaged in education. But if these people were able to expand and to share, for instance, to go to a university and to get a degree at the same time they are working with the university and engaging in the community. And then, because from what I see, the end result of this is a better Canada, economically, socially, and it might sound romantic, but even humanistically, which is a Canada with a more compassionate Canada and a more informed Canada. So I think that would be my message. That is my hope, that we move from being a refugee friendly into a refugee embracing. And embracing means hosting and helping to thrive. That would be my message.